Our next unit is about ecology. Luckily for some of you, you're taking AP Environmental Science. This unit will be covering topics you should already be familiar with. Some of you know that I have a degree in environmental science. One of the classes I had to take was actually an ecology class, so I've been right where you are, learning about what ecology is. So what is ecology? Ecology is a study of how organisms interact with each other and their environment. There are different levels of and organizations to ecology. So looking at our picture, starting at the smallest, we have an individual, a single organism. We'll represent this with a diamond. That individual is part of a population, a group of individuals of the same species living in the same area. We'll indicate that with a couple more diamonds. A population is part of a community. A community is different populations living together in an area. So we'll have different types of species living in the same community. We'll have diamonds, we'll have squares and squares, we'll have pentagons. That community is living within an ecosystem. That's all of the communities in the area and all non-living components. That ecosystem is part of a biome, a group of ecosystems with the same climate and similar communities. For example, a biome that you might be familiar with is a rainforest. We live near deserts. Those are some examples of biomes. And biomes are part of the biosphere. The biosphere is the part of the earth in which life exists, including air, land, and water. The biosphere is everything. So talking about ecology, there are so many different types. It can get very specific. There's population ecology, evolutionary ecology, community, behavioral, physiological, landscape, conservation, restoration. These are just a few of some of the many different types of ecology. During my time in my ecology class, I got very interested in conservation ecology. I'm an environmentalist. I'm very pro saving the earth and anything I can do to help reduce the human impacts that we're seeing and global climate change. In the end, I ended up focusing on environmental education, which has led me here to you guys. Ecology has a very rich history, and it goes way back, all the way back to ancient Greeks. Even Darwin made links between organisms and their environment, thinking about his finches in the Galapagos. He saw these different types of birds. They all happened to be finches. But what made them different were factors in their environment. The ones that ate the really big hard seeds had big hard beaks. The ones that needed to finagle insects out of things like trees, they had thinner, more manipulative beaks. Understanding evolution is essential to understanding applied ecology and understanding the diversity of life and how to preserve it. Here I've included a picture from my actual notebook from my actual time in my ecology class. So our last unit was on evolution. This is something that you're going to have to remember, even though we already took the test and you don't think it's important. But the way science works is that everything builds on each other. So it's a good thing we learned evolution first, because it's pretty essential to understanding ecology. Now, there are two main factors in any ecosystem: biotic factors, which are things that are living, and abiotic things, which are non-living. What are some examples of each type of thing, each type of factor, that are necessary in an ecosystem? There are two main factors, the biotic and the abiotic. Here's an image of some examples that I have found. We have a tree that's living, it's on the biotic side. Insects, fungi, animals, they're all biotic, they're all living. Examples of abiotic factors are things like weather, rain, wind, sun, temperature. Even things like that are part of the landscape, like rocks. They're not living, but they're important to the ecosystem. So let's look at this image. What types of biotic and abiotic things can you identify in this picture? So we're getting closer and closer in our realm from the biosphere down to the individual. So we're here at the ecosystem level. The ecosystem is also known as a habitat. Those terms are fairly interchangeable, especially for what we're learning about. Habitats are the home of the community. So the community is the mix of different populations of different species. Habitats are where those different communities live. And a niche is the role of each of those individuals or species and their job. How do they play a role in their habitat? So let's look at this Chinese water deer. It's pretty funny looking. It's got these cool, like, long canine fang things, also very fuzzy and cute. Here it's eating grass. That would be its niche. Its job is to eat the grass. Here is the Yangtze River. This is its habitat. This is where they live. This is where they can be found in the world. The Yangtze River is located in China, hence Chinese water deer. So there are two different types of niches. There's a broad niche and a narrow niche. There are also two types of organisms. Generalists, they eat a variety of foods, all different kinds. Usually they're omnivores. There are also specialists. They eat very few or even only one type of food. So let's look at an example. Our generalists are part of the broad niche because they eat a lot of different things. The specialists have a narrow niche. They only eat one or very few things. They're picky. So here are our examples. We have a raccoon and we have a panda. Which do you think belongs in each group? Or do they belong to the same group? Well, looking at the types of foods that they eat, raccoons are generalists. They'll dig through your trash, they'll find some yummy Chinese food, they'll eat some rotting meat, whatever. They like all types of food. They will eat all types of food. Let's look at our panda. What are pandas famously known to eat? Bamboo. This is the only thing they will eat. Literally, they will not eat anything else. So they are considered specialists. If you put a plate of, tomatoes in front of them, they wouldn't touch it. They only like their bamboo. So these organisms, these individuals, all have metabolisms. There are two types of metabolisms. Some are able to make energy from light using chemicals. Some examples would be plants, algae, bacteria. They are called autotrophs. Any organism that can convert inorganic molecules into energy. So inorganic, something like sunlight, they can take that in, go through a chemical reaction, photosynthesis, create energy. They make sugar that they can use. So what does autotroph actually break down into? Let's look at our roots. We have auto, self, and troph, feeder. They are self-feeders. They don't need anything except for a little sun, a little water, and some minerals in the earth. For most plants. Algae, they take in their other chemicals from like the ocean or the freshwater pond that they're in. But they don't need anything but themselves, some light, some water, and a couple nutrients to get by. We also have organisms that obtain energy by consuming other organisms. Examples would be birds, reptiles, humans. We can't make food from just like sitting in the sun for a while. That'd be pretty cool, but it just ain't gonna happen. We call these types of metabolisms heterotrophs. Organisms that are heterotrophs obtain food from other organisms, whether we're eating full whole organisms or we're eating processed food like potato chips. We're eating the potatoes, the autotrophs, but they were other organisms. Let's look at the roots of heterotrophs. Hetero, obviously is different. Troph, again, like autotroph, is feeder. They are another feeder. They feed on other things. Not light, not just water and minerals. They need other actual things to eat. So now that we have animals eating each other, let's go through trophic levels. There are 5, actually potentially more, trophic levels, but we're only going to talk about the basic 5. Producers, who are our autotrophs, use sunlight to gain energy. Primary consumers, they eat those producers to gain energy. Secondary consumers eat the primary, tertiary eat the secondary, apex predators eat the other tertiary consumers to gain their energy. So, come up with at least 2 examples of each level. Here's my example. My producers are going to be this cute little phytoplankton guy. He gets eaten in my habitat, in my ecosystem, by zooplankton. My zooplankton will get eaten by my secondary. I'm going to call it Nemo, my clownfish. They like to eat zooplankton. And my secondary consumer, my clownfish, will get eaten by, oh no, a barracuda! You're seeing the trend here. And our tertiary barracuda will get eaten by the big scary Bruce shark. There is a sort of pyramid happening here. Lots of phytoplankton get eaten by one zooplankton. Lots of zooplankton get eaten by one clownfish. Quite a few clownfish will get eaten by one barracuda. And a shark will feed on probably more than one barracuda. So as a review, there are different levels of ecology. We start at the individual, the most specific, to population, to community, to an ecosystem, to a biome, and finally to the biosphere, or the earth. Ecology has had a deep history in science. And there are 2 main factors in any given ecosystem: biotic factors and abiotic factors, living and non-living. There's a difference between a habitat and a niche, even though those terms are sometimes confused or thought to be interchangeable. There are broad niches and narrow niches. Generalists fall into the broad niche category. They like to eat lots of different things. They have a broad variety of foods that they like to eat. And specialists fall within the narrow niche category. They like very specific things. There are different types of metabolisms. We have autotrophs, self-trophs, feeders. They feed themselves through sunlight, water, and other minerals and nutrients. Heterotrophs, different feeders, like to eat other animals, other organisms, to gain their energy, whether they are primary consumers that eat the autotrophs, or secondary and above consumers that eat other living organisms like animals. And finally, there are different trophic levels, all the way from our little phytoplankton all the way up the pyramid to our apex predator, Bruce the shark.